to my online teaching learning session. My name is Sonal Singh Pawar and I am a psychology academic counselor for psychology courses. Today I begin with one of my first lectures for Foundations of Psychology. It is the first block, the first unit that we start with. To understand the foundation of psychology, it is going to explain us the fact that what is psychology all about, what does it deal with, what does it aim, and the objective of studying the psychology as a subject. When we move across, let's begin with understanding that what is the foundation of psychology is going to cater all of you over here. When we talk about psychology, we need to know that this is a science and a social science. We will elaborately understand the education on the field of science and social science. How did it evolve in the passage of time, and also throw light on how researches are conducted in this science in the further ado. Also moving ahead as a general understanding. What is psychology? Psychology is the study of the mind and the soul. And the term psychology is coming from two Greek words. One, psych, and the other, logos. Psych is a Greek word telling us soul, and logo is knowledge. So it understands to be a study of your soul. In the beginning, psychology was also stated to be the study of the mind. And with the passage of time, we understood that psychology is a study of both mind and soul. So to begin with, scientifically, the definition of psychology is that it studies, it's a scientific study. The term scientific is involved because we want to say that psychology involves methods which are both quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative methods, why? Because psychology understands, does researches, gives us finding of mind, behaviors, experiences, emotion, etc., both in a scientific quantitative pattern, which can be generalized all across the globe. And in quality also, quality talks about that we are going to study psychology in terms of a large number of data. So a large number of data is a representation of the population. So the scientific definition of psychology says that it's a scientific study of mental processes and behaviors. Let's understand what is behaviors. Behaviors comes in two forms: overt behaviors and covert behaviors. Overt behaviors, let's understand the O in overt is observable. So behaviors that can be seen are overt behaviors. So let's take an example. Two children fighting, hitting one another, abusing, using their hands to express aggression. Any spectator who watches this incident is going to say the two individuals, the two students involved, were fighting and very aggressive because the behaviors which were visible and observable showed that they both were putting hands, physically harming one another, and were having a verbal spat. This is observed and overt behavior. There is another kind of behavior that psychology studies is covert behavior. Covert is behavior that cannot be seen. It's covered. It is something which is not visible. So covert behavior is going to be like two people playing chess and sweating, fidgeting their hands. There's a lot of tension on their faces of what next move that they will play on the chessboard. That is a covert behavior, something which is not visible. There is no movement, there is no action which is happening, but we can observe that there is stress, there is a lot of thinking which is going beyond between the two opposition party of the chess play. So this behavior is covered. It is something which is interpreted but not visible. So behaviors are covert and overt. Second thing that psychology studies is mental processes. Mental processes can be understood in two ways. In psychology, we not only study the mind but also the brain. So brain is physical. Remember, it's the structure. It's something which is, a very hard and fast thing, which is a part of human body, like the central nervous system, the endocrinal system, the hormonal interplay, which is our hormones impacting our behavior, is something which is going to be a brain part. Like, let's take an example. Whenever we go for those joy rides that we enjoy and children enjoy, there's an adrenal rush that gives a state of happiness to us. That is a behavior which is coming because of the central nervous system and then the change of the hormones. So that's the brain part, of functionality of our physical body. Then there's another part of psychology that involves in mental processes is mind. Mind is something which is not structurally seen. You cannot see a mind. Like a brain is a skull, there is within it as a cerebrum, there's an entire central nervous system, but we cannot see the mind. Mind is something which is not structural. It thinks. It is the process of knowing. So another example. While you're reading a book, your mind and your brain both are playing a part. Your mind is helping you read. Your mind is helping you learn. It will help you memorize everything. You learn, you will memorize, and you will recall everything. That is the mind. The thinking, learning, problem solving, decision making, the delay that you want to do probably in your decision making, the procrastination that we show while we are studying, that is something which is the mind. And the lethargy because of what you cannot study, the fainting spells that children get when they are too stressed and they cannot study, is the brain. So scientific definition states that it's the study of brain and mental processes. As we understood what is psychology, it's going to study the brain, it is going to study your mind, and it is the study of your soul. So it's an interplay of mind, soul, and behaviors. We move to the next component that is going to tell us what is psychology as a discipline. So do we call it a science or is it a social science? We call it both. Psychology is going to talk about both science and social science. How it is both? How do we call it as a natural science and a social science? Let's understand what is a natural science and what is a social science. Natural science are sciences which is more physical, like physics, chemistry, that can be verified, can be tested and checked in your environment. It uses multiple methods, and methods are mostly quantitative. They are numeric. They can come out in numbers. They are very structural. They happen in a closed and controlled condition. So that is a natural science, and a natural science can always can always be explained by a theory. I'll give you a very simple example, which I am sure everyone has studied, which is Newton's law. Newton's law is a physical science. It's also called a natural science. We had laws concerning force and change, which was observed, seen, it was testified and verified. Very scientific. It can be tested, it can be verified. It was seen and then generalized. So it's a natural science. What is a social science? Social science is where human behavior can be influenced by social structure. It studies society, it studies human behavior within the society. So the impact of probably culture, social conditions, impact of discrimination, impact of prejudices, impact of liking, how it can change your social interaction. That is social science because it studies societies and individuals within society. Psychology at the same time is a natural science. Why? We have findings and theories which are explained by a scientific phenomena. So when we will study further how we can memorize, how we can get it better, how we can enhance memory, we have theories behind the same. So it becomes a natural science, which is it has a scientific theory in explaining a phenomena. So there is a theory in psychology also which will tell you why memorizing is happening, how we are learning, how we can take the learning better. And at the same time, psychology is also social science. It is qualitative. It does talk about how it is influenced by social conditions. Pandemic was a great example for psychology as a social science. We were all homestruck, social human beings, not being able to interact with one another. Many of us, has a change in our personality. Why? Because of the environment that pandemic gave us. So that was the influence of the societal structure that was happening on us. So this explains that psychology is both a natural science, which is it is a scientific study. It will use quantitative methods. It will have theories to explain scientific psychology phenomena, and at the same time, it is a social science also. How? Because it does talk about environmental factors, societal factors, cultural factors that can also impact human behavior and show changes in the process of mind, thinking, and thought. This explains that psychology is coming from both the sciences, social and natural. And speaking about its origin, psychology was a science which came from philosophy and biology both. So you will find here reflection of philosophical roots and biological roots. Why do we say both? Like the mind and the brain, your mind is something which answers why are you thinking, how are you thinking, and how it was made. Biology tells us which hormone, which part of the brain is telling us to behave like this. That's how the origin of psychology goes back to philosophical and physiological, right? So we remember physiological is the body and philosophy answers the questions of the words, why something is happening and why not. So this is how psychology started in its early times in around 1850s, where its evolution began. The development also began of psychology. How did psychology came into play? Psychology started in around 1950s, and in the beginning, everyone was learning about thinking, reasoning, images, sensation through experiments. There were experiments which were done on human subjects. We were experimenting on thinking processes, memorization. We were experimenting on how people can learn better in a scientific scenario in controlled condition. So from moving from the development, we will understand during evolution many perspectives came. So perspectives or school of thought, that is, many psychologists came up with their ideas to explain what was psychology. They all was telling us how and where is psychology coming from. So the first perspective of evolution was structuralism. Structuralism was given by two major contributors, which was Edward Titchener and William Wundt. William Wundt was the first individual and a psychologist who started understanding psychology in terms of structures. So imagine your mind is now going to be divided into structures and understood. So how? I'll give you an example. How structuralism explained psychology in evolutionary times. It stated that like a brick and mortar, you all see a wall. Wall is made up of what? Bricks, mortar, like the cement, the materials that it comprised of. Structuralism, the two psychologists, which was William Wundt and Edward Titchener, they also stated that mind comprises of parts. There are structures in it. Structures would be images, sensation, it is perception. It talks about how do you see an image. Whenever you see images, you see colors, you see people, and then you see parts. You get them together. So this is how structuralism stated about what is psychology. Psychology can be defined as structures of mind. Also, they played a lot of attention on consciousness, something which is happening right now. So psychology is not about what happened in the past, what will happen in the future. It's the study of mind, of the consciousness. Consciousness right now is something that I'm teaching. In our teaching learning process, if you learn with me, this is your conscious mind. So we are going to just study of what is happening in your mind right now. And second important point, the structures. The conscious is divided into parts, into structures. Second attempt that these people made were a very effective method that they came up to identify the structures, which was called objective introspection. So we can understand your structures of mind through introspection according to structuralism. How? Introspection is simply understanding and mapping yourselves objectively of what happened to you in a day. We tell a lot of students introspect in a day. How did your day go? You will understand where were you wrong, what you did not do right. So that is what is called introspection. Scanning the events, emotion, feelings, and thoughts of behavior objectively, which is very unbiasedly, is called objective introspection. It was one of the first methods, one of the first school of thought. First perspective structuralism gave a method also to study it. Also, William Wundt was one of the first psychologists who also gave his book, which was called Principles of Psychology. So this was the first model which started evolution of psychology by structuralism. Structuralism on its had a lot of criticism also. Why? I'll tell you why it was criticized. Structuralism was criticized because, first of all, how can you divide your mind into pieces? How can you decide that your mind function in pieces? That was the first criticism that William Wundt and Edward Titchener's perspective faced. Second was the introspection as a method was not taken very well. The further psychologists that we will study, they mention introspection is not at all objective. So it's not a scientific method. Why? If I'm introspecting my day and I'm being biased with my experiences, I'm being biased with my behavior, and I state out something which I feel is correct, that is not an objective introspection. That's a biased demonstration of feeling, thoughts, and action. So this method was not taken to be empirical, which is it was not taken to be scientific. It is wrapped by your own thoughts, it is wrapped by your own emotions and the way you want to proceed with it. After this, after structuralism, came our second perspective and second school of thought, which was called functionalism. Functionalism was a part of an evolutionary process, like it was influenced by Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. We have all heard of Charles Darwin when we talk about evolution. He spoke about natural selection, survival of the fittest. The most smartest individual will survive and move to next. That's how our society is also functioning. If you do not do well in one of your grades, you move back, you repeat that grade, and you are not able to move ahead. And the smartest ones are moving ahead. So that is the survival of the fittest. Functionalism, the second perspective, which was influenced by Darwin's theory of natural selection, stated the same. They gave this same point to psychological characteristic and psychological understanding. By what? That we understand mind on the basis of the functions of the mind. So we are not understanding the what of the mind. We are understanding the how and why of mind. Why the mind functions and how it is functioning. So we are interested in what? We are not interested in the structures now. We have moved ahead. We are moving from traditional thought to more modern thought. We want to understand the functions of the mind. So functions of the mind were understood by understanding the purpose of your behavior. So now the two major psychologists who were a part of functionalism was John Dewey and William James. William James is also supposed and stated to be the founder of functionalism. He was the one who came up with the perspective of functionalism and stated that psychology can be understood by the functions of your mind. So, what are you functioning is not the thing. How and why are you functioning? What is the purpose of your function? So, purpose and function was now something which was the definition and part of the evolution of psychology. Functionalism went by. There was another new perspective that came after functionalism. This perspective was called Gestalt psychology and Gestalt perspective. Gestalt psychology rejected structuralism. They stated we do not like structuralism. Structuralism is very primitive, very old. How can you understand someone's behavior, someone's thought and experiences by the structure, what it comprises of? So they moved to Gestalt psychology, stated we understand people's behavior, people's psyche by their experiences and perception. So let's take an example. We go to a very beautiful area. So if we talk about Gestalt, Gestalt says that we understand your psyche by the perception, the organization that you have in your mind of the perception. So organization happens when we see that entire place, that scenic beauty that you are seeing as a whole, as a unified structure. So I'll give you another example to understand Gestalt. We see puzzle pieces. Puzzle pieces are not understood until you make the entire puzzle. One piece matches the other and the entire puzzle is complete. You understand this is the picture that the puzzle is trying to represent. Why? Because it is the unified whole. You could not understand the puzzle in pieces. You understood it when the entire puzzle was matched and it was like a picture. So this is also what Gestalt as the word is understood. Gestalt is a German word, and it states and it means unified whole, organized whole, something which is complete. So this was Gestalt's major idea, that everything is whole, psyche of you, which is individuals, and the mind of the individual can be understood as whole, as complete, not into pieces. You cannot now understand into parts. You cannot understand them as, the brick and mortar concept of structuralism. Also, after this, when we say that Gestalt was headed by German psychologists, there were three major psychologists who were functioning and contributors: Max Wertheimer, Kurt Kafka, and Wolfgang Kohler. And they again stated that your experiences are holistic. You cannot understand anybody's mind, experiences, and even behavior in parts, which is very true. I'll give you another example to some Gestalt psychology. You go for a movie. Imagine the first 20-25 minutes of the movie is gone. What happened? You've left the first portion. Now it is not a complete structure. It is not a complete movie that you've watched. So to understand a movie, We cannot watch the movie in pieces. You cannot watch the second half an hour, the last half an hour. You need to see the entire movie. That's how you understand it as an experience. That's how human mind can also be understand as complete, not in pieces. So after Gestalt, which has a very remarkable presence in psychology. It gives rise to an explanation to a lot of other concepts like perception and intention, which we will do further. After Gestalt came another perspective, perspective and a school of thought which was very evolved, which is called behaviorism. Behaviorism came with a very revolutionary thought. They say we want to study the behaviors of people. Behavior is equivalent to the psyche of mind, which is it is the psychology of an individual. So why behavior? Behaviors are important because they study something which is observable. Behaviorists are studying behaviors. So behaviors are what? They are observable, they can be verified, and they are only studying overt behavior. I explained overt behavior in the beginning. It is observable and visible behaviors. So when behaviors are observed, they can be tested also. I'll give you an example why this was such a revolutionary perspective. Let's take an example. There's a child who drops everything, bangs himself around walking, always drops things here, also loses items very early. Given a new bottle, loses it. Gives a new pencil, lost it. Third day, you give him a new, probably another pencil box, the child loses it. What do we find here? We observe the child behavior. We can now verify the child is a little clumsy and restless. How did we come to this conclusion? We came to this conclusion by observing the behavior and testing the behavior every day. So that's how behaviorism was such a revolutionary perspective because it was scientific. Why? Because we can observe something, we can test it, we can verify it. The major contributors of behaviorism was three people. One was John Watson, who was the founder. There was B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov. So some of the main points that you will find of behaviorism are they study behaviors, they understand the psychology of an individual by their behaviors because behaviors are objective, they're very scientific. Second, they focus on behaviors that are overt, not covert, not covered behaviors, behaviors that can be observed. Also, out of the three contributors that we have, Ivan Pavlov started the process of conditioning of behaviors. He gave a concept of conditioning, how conditioning happens in an individual, which is a kind of learning, how we can condition people with a kind of learning through a activity and a scientific procedure that he conducted on his dog when he was observing his dog through process of digestion. So this was major contribution of behaviorism. I will still say behaviorism is one of those perspectives which are still running in psychology. We use them even today. So that's why it's one of the most revolutionary perspective that we had. After behaviorism came more perspectives which was more radical. This is something a lot of students might have heard of the psychologist Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud came in around 1800s end and he came with a radical view, a view which was objected by many psychologists, view that is in society and culture is not accepted easily. He was Sigmund Freud coming with a view of psychoanalysis. What is psychoanalysis? Psychoanalysis is analysis of the mind. And how did Sigmund Freud analyze mind? He stated major points. What is important? Unconsciousness is important. And this unconscious has some hidden desires. These desires are something which leads to your behavior. So he was a very different psychologist. He's not talking about behaviors anymore. He's not talking about structures, not talking about function. And perception also, no organization is needed. Sigmund Freud was talking that behaviors are manifested because of the unconscious desires and feelings which are to be gratified. So let's take the similar example. A child who's aggressive is because he is aggressive because of some unconscious desires that he has in his mind. Those unconscious desires are repressed. They are not fully explained, demonstrated in the passage of time. And that's why, because for their satisfaction, those desires are leading to such a behavior. So few points that we need to know, which was very radical and not accepted in the early times. Unconscious thought. People were not talking about it because we cannot test it. Can we test unconscious thought? No. Why? Conscious is something that I'm teaching you right now. It is easily and readily available to you. Conscious, I can ask you, you learn this thing and you read back, you will understand. Unconscious is something which has gone back in the childhood times. It can be part of your dreams. Unconscious can also be those feelings and desires which were not completed in your childhood times or probably in the passage of 10 years back. But you don't remember them today. You do not have an easy access to it. So these are those experiences you cannot access. And we are talking about gratification of these desires which are leading to behaviors. So the way you aggressively behave, the way you cooperate, the way you help people, or whatever behavior that you show in the environment is a manifestation. It's coming from the fulfilling of these unconscious desires and feelings. So it was something which was very unacceptable because we have never seen people's unconscious mind. Also, he spoke of desires which were more biological and sexual in nature. So, and sexual drives were not something which were addressed in the 1800 times also. Even in the Euro-American times, sexual desires were not something that we will address. That's something that we are going to talk about in the early times. So that was another rejection that he faced. Also, he stated that childhood experience is very important. Why? The childhood experience that you have, good experiences or bad experience, they are very instrumental in the behaviors that you reflect today. Sigmund Freud was the only individual who is the main contributor of psychoanalysis, and also he gave methods to analyze psyche. So structuralism gave methods. Now he is the second psychologist who is giving another method in the evolution of psychology, which was called free association and dream interpretation. Two methods, which is associating freely, talking freely, which is free association, and this was interpretation of dreams that we will talk about. So little just of psychoanalysis, a very radical view. After psychoanalysis came more perspective, more modern perspective which were more relatable to society, something that we can associate very easily is called humanism. Humanistic perspective was a very positive perspective. Why? It is called the third force also in psychology. The reason for this is because this perspective stated we can understand the psyche of an individual, which is defined psychology according to people's happiness, their wish to grow, their wish to actualize in their life. So this was called the third force of psychology because it was interested in the happiness and the inner abilities of individuals. And also humanistic perspective was one of the first perspective that stated that it is humans are very positive. We have the free will to grow. We have an inborn tendency to keep growing all the time. So we all have an inborn tendency to grow. That's why, we keep learning. We keep picking up opportunities in life. We'll graduate. We want to do a post-graduation. We want to learn. We want to take a job. After one job, you want to get promoted. Why is this happening? Because we all have that inner need to grow, to move from one step to another of growth or actualization. Let's understand what is self-actualization. Self-actualization is a process of reaching your inner highest ability. So until you do not reach your self-actualization, it's like you keep moving ahead. You keep taking up opportunities. You keep striving for more and more. Two major psychologists who played an important role here were Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. A little gist of humanism. I'll redo it again for you. It says it's the third force. Why? One of the first perspective that were talking about humanism, and they were talking about that humans are very positive. You understand psychology by understanding their needs, their inner needs, and their ability to grow all the time. And we have that inborn ability to grow. Also, they stated that human beings have the free will and they are striving for self-actualization. So we are always growing. We have the free will. So you have the power to decide. Do you want to choose the next step or not? Or you're happy with what you get today? So that's how whenever there's an opportunity coming, you have the free will to decide that do you want to satisfy your need or you want to go ahead now. You are done and you want to move and you want to actualize further. Not every one of us is self-actualizing. I feel not every one of us will actualize and reach our highest potential. I say that a lot of examples in the society which you find might have actualized. Mother Teresa is one of those examples. She was an example where she actualized and reached her inner potential, giving charity, working for humans and their their plighted life. And she was the one who did a lot of charity, gave a lot, spent maximum of her life in moving to every next step, every next opportunity to provide to people. So that is self-actualization. Not everyone will do that. After humanism came another perspective, another new perspective, which was the sixth perspective, which is cognitive perspective. Cognitive is a very modern perspective, very modern, something that you see today. It was interested in studying the cognition. So, cognitive perspective is going to talk about cognition. Cognition is the process of knowing. So, process of knowing is, as I said, it's the process of thinking, reasoning, problem solving, decision making, intelligence. How do you memorize? How do you learn? So these are processes that we all are very much interested in nowadays. So cognitive is a very modern process, something which is today used maximally today. We are interested how to enhance memory. We are interested to change your learning. Students are interested to learn better, to learn faster. So this is a cognitive process which understood psychology, which is the psyche of an individual through cognitive processes. So once you understand the process of cognition is the understanding of the psyche of an individual. So that is how psychology was defined in this perspective. Two major contributors here also was Hermann Ebbinghaus extend and also Bartlett. These two psychologists extendedly studied memory. They study how did we memorize, how can we lead to better memorization process. They also compared human memory to a computer. They said like a computer function, human memory also functions. Why? Computer has the ability to store information, first to receive information. Like we have a Word document, we write in that Word document, you have put in everything in the Word document of yours, and now what are you going to do? You're going to save it through a name and then you recover it whenever you need it next. Our memory does the same. We learn, we keep reading, we store it in our memory, we keep rehearsing, and whenever there's an exam, what do? You recall. So, very rightly, human mind were considered to be metaphorically associated to something which is computers. And extended studies were done on learning, were done on decision making and problem solving activities to understand how the psyche function on the basis of cognition. After this perspective, which was something which was one of those modern perspective, came few of the lighter perspective in the modern times. This was socio-cultural perspective. Why did socio-cultural perspective come into play in that time? That was because we were talking about individual differences also. Like we all are different. The way our mind memorize, the way our conscious functions, the way our unconscious functions is going to be different from one another. So socio-cultural perspective stated that our main focus is to understand the social and cultural factors that influences your behavior. So psychology is in this perspective evolved and stated that we understand behavior according to social and cultural perspective. Like I always say, India is such a diverse country. We have different cultures and social norms everywhere. Two people sitting together might come from different culture, have a different kind of clothing, different kind of language, different kind of behaviors. Why is that happening? Why the psychology of two individuals with different clothing, different language, different ways of addressing and talking is because they're impacted by their culture, by their norms, by their social activities. So it was again a very modern perspective that took into play, took into control the individual differences of society, the various psyches of the world. Also, they also quoted through researches that Western culture has a very individualistic thought. So, and Asian culture, which we also, when we talk about Asian, we are considering Indians also here. We are saying Indians and Asian people are very collectivistic. Why? That's why in a social gathering, Indians are found to merge with one another. They love to work collectively, support one another. We don't say and disregard this of the Western culture, but Western culture is very independent. That's why children are so independent. They're far more faster decision makers at the age of 13 and 14, 15 as compared to our Indian children. Why Indian children believe in contributing and working, listening to a lot of factors before they decide what to do in life, how to do in life. So So that's why Western culture was concluded to be individualistic, and Indian and Asian culture was considered to be something which was as a collectivistic culture. This a research study, a very famous research study under social cultural perspective. Also, there was a biological perspective, a very simple one, stated the psychology can be understood by the impact of the biological processes of the body. So it's like the relationship of the mental process, the brain part, and the behaviors. So let's take an example. The day we are feeling very lazy, very lethargic, we cannot study. Your mind loses control. Why? Because your brain is feeling lazy. You are releasing hormones which is leading to a very sleepy, lethargic attitude, and you're not further able to study. So your behaviors is a representation of your biological process. So the impact of that was seen in this perspective. And the last part and the last perspective of the evolution was the evolutionary perspective. It was not the last per se, but this was just a little input which was given by this perspective that stated that we should understand the psychology of human, which is the psyche of or the mind, through the evolutionary thought also, which was largely contributed by Charles Darwin, their theory of natural selection, the idea of survival of fittest. And how does it work? They mention that the process of adaptation is made. We all know in the survival of fittest, adaptation is the key process. If you don't adapt, you don't move to the next level and the others get away. They are thrown out. They move out and you move ahead alone because you have adapted. Let's use this on a psychology process. If let's take an example of aggression. Let's take an example of something which is personality, intelligence. This is also like our other, biological perspective, passes from parents to offspring. And if we have the most advanced, every process within us, we tend to adapt. Similarly, they applied this evolutionary thought to psychology, mentioned that we move our personality, our intelligence, our tendencies of aggression, frustration is getting transferred from parents to offspring. So genetic is the term. The fact that you are like your parents is something which is going to talk about evolutionary perspective, which is we transfer even biological perspectives, biological tendencies, psychological tendencies from parents to offspring. Your personality, your intelligence, your aggressive tendencies, your tendencies of to grow is going to be like your parents because it's transferred by your parents to offspring. Talks about inheritance moving from one generation to the other. This completes the evolution of psychology. So psychology started in 1850s, started with structuralism, came functionalism, came after functionalism, we came to Gestalt psychology. Gestalt further went up and gave rise to behaviorism. Behaviorism, after that came psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, then came humanism that we had. Humanism, a very positive perspective, and after humanism, we moved ahead with modern perspective, which were more applicable to our society, which was cognitive perspective, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, very evident in your learning today. And then social cultural, biological, and evolutionary. By this, we understand these were the different ideas of psychologists from traditional pattern to modern pattern. So we started with very primitive thought of structures and we came down to society, we came down to unconscious, we came down to behaviors and humanism. After understanding that psychology is evolved in a way, we need to know today psychology has a very good grip in the society. We have major fields of psychology and branches of psychology that you can study and probably you can learn. Let's start with the most popular one, which is called the clinical psychology. Clinical psychology also takes care of the maximum percentage of people studying and practicing in our society. It might be approximating from areas to areas globally from 30 to 40% of population of psychology learners falling here, which is like a huge percent. So clinical psychology is referring to psychology that deals with the treatment and understanding of mental disorders. Extreme mental disorders, which are of higher end, which are of psychotic concerns, which is something like mental disorders like schizophrenia, extreme depression, personality disorders, and they talk about even treatment. No medication is given by psychologist. That is a part of psychiatrist, which we will understand later. Second field is the counseling field. Counseling is something which is growing with the passage of time. There are many counselors coming in different areas. Counseling psychology talks about, again, managing small behavioral and emotional problems of people. So this is on a lighter note than clinical. Clinical deals with neurotic and psychotic disorders. These counseling psychology deals with something which is going to talk about, something which is general emotional behavioral problems. We have school and educational psychology. Educationalist psychologists are people who are going to write up policies according to the different boards, the area, rural, urban. And school psychology deals with children, management of children, better performances, issues with children, having difficulties in learning, reading, and writing, and supporting them. After that, we have industrial and organization, which is very, very much increasing in the passage of time. They are dealing with employee satisfaction, mending the gap between the employer and the employee, and increasing their performance, getting better performance. They help in recruitment. They help in who is better for what post and why. Then we have cognitive psychology, again dealing with thinking, reasoning, problem solving. There is another one, developmental psychology, which is increasing with the passage of time. In the percentages, it's coming to 4 to 5% in our society. This deals with understanding the developmental stages from infancy to the last stage of our life. So all what has happened to your cognition, physically, mentally, growth, physical changes, mental changes, social changes, it studies everything and supports. There is an experimental psychology which deals with experiments and scientific study. Also, very few new fields have come up, which is forensic, health, community, and sports. Sports psychology deals with performance, which is on a state, national, and international level of the sportsmen. They take care of their morale boost, motivation levels. Forensic obviously is coming to more scientific studies of finding out, data, gathering from information of what is happening on the scientific level. Also, a very small percentage of forensic science is working in India at the moment, and lesser amount of job opportunities. Health is increasing. Why? Because health supports counselors of all the kinds, psychiatrists and counselors. Health talks about something which is, psychology, that are going to take care of stress when an individual is suffering from a chronic health issue. A lot of cancer patients visit health psychologists for helping and supporting of their moral boost, of building their courage for their treatment, to go on, to get support, to understand better, and to have a better perspective, positive perspective of life. Community is coming to community services, non-governmental organization which functions for the lower sector of society. Community services are a range of services which are coming for children also, a very growing psychological field. After that, let's understand what are the methods of psychology and do we really research. Research is an integral part of psychology, let's remember that. We have to be scientific and non-biased, and all the researchers and investigators have some goals and assumptions. There are 4 goals and assumptions which are there, which are describing a behavior. So when you research, psychologists and investigators come with a thought that we want to describe. What is this behavior? They might come with a thought of explaining the behavior, how this behavior is happening. Once they know it, they want to predict behaviors. They want to observe it continuously and predict it. Once you're able to understand why a behavior is happening, you want to change it. So I'll give you an example. And also remember, not all investigators will make sure that all of these things are their goals. Some investigators just describe. Some investigators just do a study which is descriptive study. Some experiment. So they will experiment and do everything. So speaking about, let's take an example. We want to study the play activities of children. So if you want to study how children play and how physical activities are in children today, especially toddlers, which are 2, 3, and 4 today. So what do? We make an observation, we describe the behavior, we are explaining the behavior, but we are not controlling and predicting. So this is one example that investigators do not do all of it. And there are examples where we'll find that investigators make changes. Like, let's take an example, obesity is a growing concern in teenagers today. And teenagers are, getting into having a lot of screen time. So we tend to have a lesser of physical mobility. So we understand that why this, physical problem, which is obesity happening, an eating problem, which is happening with children, which is obesity. So this is describing the behavior. Then we will understand why this behavior is happening, what are the causes. Once you understand it is because of too much screen time and too much of bad eating habits, we've predicted children who sit more on the screen will have obesity as a concern. Now we can control it. We can give them exercises during their screen time. So this is how an investigator can use all these four as a golden assumption. So researches do not happen haphazardly. They happen in a proper set and steps. So as we understand, researches happen in a series of 7, or it can be 5 also, steps. So first step of researches is to identify a problem. I gave a problem right now, obesity in the growing teenagers. So that could be a problem. We can also have a problem of, caffeine consumption and concentration. There are a lot of people who intake a lot of caffeine, lot of coffee intake, and that impacts the concentration. That is a identification of problem. Once you have a problem, we have to have a hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? Hypotheses are tentative answers. We have to have some guesses for our scientific research, which can help us design what we will do further. So hypotheses are very fundamental, very important. Once a hypothesis is formed, you can select a method. Which method do I need to study? Once the method is selected, what do? We collect data. Collection of data will then require analysis of the data. Analysis can be, again, as I said in the beginning, quantitative and qualitative. You can do it through statistical methods, or you can do a detailed study of verbalization and explanation of the data. Once the analysis and interpretation is done, we write the report of the research. So report will tell us if the hypothesis that we give, was it approved or disapproved? None of them are approved, or any one of them was approved or not. So like an example I gave, caffeine consumption and concentration can be the problem. Hypothesis is more caffeine, lesser concentration. Or another hypothesis, lesser coffee, more concentration. So my report writing would be on the basis of interpretation. What happened? Did hypothesis 1 got approved or 2? Let's take an example. My hypothesis 2nd got approved, that caffeine consumption, lesser caffeine consumption, more concentration is there. So that is the report that we get at the end, a scientific way of doing the research. Methods get completed. Let's dwell into what methods do we have. We have 2 major kind of methods. One is descriptive. Descriptives are qualitative method. You do not use stats. So they are 3 in number. And they are called descriptive because they describe information, they explain. They do not control. They do not predict. They do not do any statistical technique. So these are 3. One is survey, observation, general observation, and case study. Surveys are a detailed information of a subject or a population, or or a content that you want to find out in a limited number of time. Surveys can be questionnaire. Today there are so many surveys that you get online, over the mobile, or face to face, right? Or probably over the phone call also that we get. So this is survey. Survey has a lot of advantages. Saves time, quick data, large number of data in less amount of time. Disadvantage, you can give wrong answers, like the online call surveys that you get. You give wrong answers, you cut the call, you are disinterested. So these are some disadvantages. Then we have observation. General observation is of observing a behavior, noting and reporting. Simple, no change, nothing we have done. We have case studies also. Case studies are in-depth detail of a lesser amount of participants, and it's an in-depth detail. You study everything about that subject. Lesser participants we have here. We don't have more participants here, we have lesser participants, 2, 3, not 50 and 10. That is not the agenda in case studies. Lesser participants. So we study less participants, lot of data we get. So the advantage of this is we get primary data, like first-hand data of the subject that you are researching upon. Authenticity is high, in-depth information, likes, dislike, their course of action and life from 1 year of age till 20 years of age you have in hand. What is the disadvantage? Takes a lot of time, lot of cost involves. It has a lot of costation, and you can be biased. You will end up proving what you want to prove because you have stayed with that subject, learning and understanding for 20 years. There can be a lot of biases, right? After that, we come to the more scientific understanding. To study scientifically, there are 3 major methods which I use: scientific observation, experimental method, and something which is we have as correlation. What are experimental methods? Experimental methods are very scientific in nature. Why? It uses the research problem, the 7 research steps that we studied in the previous 2-minute section back. That we will have a problem, we will form a hypothesis, we will test the hypothesis, collect data, analyze it, and give the result. Similarly, experimental method does the same thing. It involves the manipulation of variable and establishes a cause and effect between the variables. Let's understand what is a variable. Variable can be any object, subject, it can be any event which can vary it. A bottle can also be a variable. Filled bottle, empty bottle. A room can also be a variable. A dark room, a lighter room, a bigger room, a smaller room. Similarly, remember I had 2 variables in my last discussion, caffeine and concentration. Concentration can be higher and lower. Caffeine consumption can be more and less. So it's cause and effect. And there are 2 kinds of variables that we will have here, major, which is independent and dependent. Independent variables are those variables which are manipulated by the experimenter. I manipulated what? Coffee consumption. I can give it more and I can give it less also. So that is independent variable. Independent variable impact is seen on the dependent variable. That is what we study also. So the cause becomes the coffee, the effect becomes the concentration. And dependent variable is always something that you study. The effect is always something that you study. So that is also something like the impact of screen time on physical body. So screen time becomes the cause, impact is the physical body health. That is cause and effect that we have. Also, there are 2 methods that you will have an experimental method, which is control and experimental group. Why do we have these 2 methods? We have these 2 methods because at times when we are studying a problem, there are many extraneous variables that come into play. So when we control those variables, extra variable like heat, frustration probably, the room is too small where you are doing that process or studying. When there is a caffeine consumption, maybe it is very cold, it's very rainy, the consumption increases automatically. So these are some extraneous variable from the environment. So to control them, we have a control group, and control group does what? It removes the independent variable. There is no coffee there. An experimental variable has the cause and effect both. So this is how an experiment functions, taking care of all the steps, including all the steps, coming to a result, proving, disapproving a finding scientifically, which is on a data, construction, test, regularized, numbering, very scientific. Then we come to another very interesting method, which is called correlation. Correlation is a very simple method to be used. It talks about information which is collected, which is very understood on the basis of 2 variables on one sample, or probably 2 samples on one variable. So in a simple way, correlation understands the relationship between 2 variables. How is the relation? Is it positive? So the relationship between the set of score is positive, or it is negative, or it is 0. So I'll give you another example of 2 variables, one sample and one sample, 2 variables. Extroverts are happier than introverts. That's an example. Extrovert and introverts become 2 variables. Sample is happiness. Also another example, and how it can be positive and negative to understand. More physical activity, healthier individual. So if one goes up, the other goes up. That is positive. If one goes up and the other goes down, it is called negative. And if there is no relationship, they are not related. Like the screen time and interest, no relationship between the 2. It's a 0 correlation. Remember, there's a coefficient of correlation which varies from +1, which is positive, -1, which is negative, which decreases, and the other is 0 correlation. When 2 variables do not have any relationship between the 2, it's called 0 correlation. A very interesting method, very scientific again. We use statistical methods here to understand it. Very important. Now the next thing. Ethics and psychology is also very important. Ethical principles are important while conducting a research. A very simple topic to understand. And I'll start it with the most simple thing. Confidentiality and voluntary participation is very important. We need to ask voluntarily, your subject is agreeing to do this research with you, wants to take the coffee consumption, wants to do coffee consumption or not. If they don't voluntarily participate, you cannot force them. Second, all the activities which are done with your participant has to be confidential. Any information which is shared in survey, case studies, experimental method should not go to anybody. Respect that as a researcher. Keep it private, else the trust is broken. Keep their dignity higher. Don't share it with other people. Then we have informed consent. A consent needs to be taken by your subject to state that they will undergo all the process of the researches with you with giving consent, which is giving you a consent for it. And two very important and newly formed thing is non-beneficence and beneficence. Beneficence is your research should give a benefit to the well-being of the subject. Your subject should not come out after the research, oh God, what happened to me? This is harming me. I don't understand this. That should not happen. It should benefit. And the last is non-beneficence, which talks about not harming your subject through the passage of research that you have. Now, when researches are taken into that, you are very competent as a researcher. You need to be learning everything. You should be integrate and responsible. Once the ethics are done and you're able to understand that, these are the research processes that, while you research, you do a method, you should respect your participant. Researcher should be competent. Researcher should be enabled, have all the knowledge. This is how psychology in the beginning researches are conducted and taken care of. Now, coming to the last portion to know, psychology in India started how? Do we have an evolution? Yes, but our evolution is very brief. Psychology in India is greatly influenced by Western concepts. We need to know. We do not have Indian concepts to dwell for. We were working on all the structuralism, functionalism that came into play. Also, the first psychological department and thought was raised in the University of Calcutta in around 1916, and the course in the same place was given by something which was the Vice Chancellor of Calcutta. Also, Dr. N.N. Gupta was the first scholar from Harvard University, and Professor G. Bose was the Indian psychoanalysis. And then after that, we need to know psychology department was started in Allahabad University in 1961, and from 60 onwards, you will find it Aligarh Muslim University, Madras University, NIMHANS, which is in 1974 established, gave rise to Indian psychology, a well-placed roots in India. Today, Indian psychology uses indigenous thought and methods, but it is still running on Western concepts that we have. This was our first understanding of foundation of psychology, all of you, which started with what is psychology, the evolution, how it is scientific, what are the methods which make it scientific, and I hope it has been understood by everyone at all. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.